So, you think you know the story of the Declaration of Independence, right? Thomas Jefferson, July 4th, fireworks, the whole deal. But what if I told you the story we all learned in school isn't just missing a few details, it's hiding the most important parts? Let's get into what really happened.
You know these words. They're basically the mission statement for America, the ideal the entire nation is supposed to be built on. It's the one line we can all recite.
Yeah, about that. The real story behind those famous words is way more complicated, and honestly, a lot more interesting than the clean version we get in textbooks.
Okay, so let's tackle the first big myth right out of the gate. This idea that Thomas Jefferson was some kind of lone genius, just channeling these profound truths onto the page all by himself.
I mean, that's the image we all have in our heads, isn't it? Jefferson with the quill pen, just writing history. He gets all the credit.
But here's the reality. The Continental Congress didn't give the job to one guy. They gave it to a committee of 5. And look who was on it. You've got the era's superstars, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, all the big names. And then there was Jefferson.
And get this, Jefferson was kind of the new guy. He was a young delegate, not super well known yet. John Adams actually tapped him for the job for 2 reasons. First, they needed a guy from the powerful Virginia delegation. And second, Adams flat out admitted that Jefferson was a much better writer than he was.
So the whole lone genius thing? Nope. It was a group project. And those unforgettable phrases, they didn't just appear out of thin air. It was more like a remix. Jefferson was borrowing ideas and tweaking phrases from other popular writers and thinkers of his day.
All right, so the author wasn't who we thought. What about the date? Are we even lighting our fireworks on the right day?
Okay, look at this timeline. In June 1776, Congress is meeting in Philly. But the key date here is July 2nd. That is the day Congress actually voted for independence. That was the moment. Legally, America was free.
And this wasn't just some technicality. John Adams was so convinced that July 2nd was the real deal that he wrote letters saying future generations would celebrate it forever with parades and, you guessed it, fireworks. Well, he got the fireworks part right, just off by 2 days. So why the 4th? Well, because that's the day Congress approved the final wording of the document that explained why they were doing it. The easiest way to think about it is this. July 2nd was the vote. July 4th was the press release. And of course, the press release had the better story, so that's the day that stuck. But this next part, this is the part of the story they really don't tell you in school. This isn't about a simple mix-up over a date. This is about a very deliberate, very important deletion from the text.
So, Jefferson turns in his draft. And for 2 solid days, the rest of Congress just tears into it. You have to imagine Jefferson, the writer, sitting there silently as they picked apart his words. Apparently, he was absolutely fuming.
And most of the edits were small. You know, a word here, a comma there. But there was one edit that was not minor at all. They cut an entire paragraph. And what was in that paragraph changes everything.
In his original draft, in the list of all the bad things the king had done, Jefferson included a bombshell of a passage. He accused King George III of forcing the slave trade on the American colonies and then blocking them from ending it.
Just let that sink in. An anti-slavery clause was in the original draft of the Declaration of Independence, which leads to the huge and pretty uncomfortable question, why on earth was it taken out?
Well, the answer comes down to a really painful compromise. The Southern delegates, from colonies whose economies were built on slavery, refused to sign any document that condemned the practice. So, to keep all the colonies united for the war against Britain, the passage was cut. It was a conscious choice, unity over morality.
And that single deletion, that decision to erase an uncomfortable truth to hold everyone together, it leaves us with the central conflict of the entire American story. It leaves us with an unfinished promise. Because it forces us to ask this impossible question, how could the very same men in the very same room sign a document that says all men are created equal while also profiting from a system that says some people are property?
And that contradiction, it wasn't a minor detail. It was a crack in the very foundation of the country, a crack that would later explode into a civil war. And it's a tension that, let's be honest, we are still dealing with today.
But here's the thing. Knowing all this doesn't make the Declaration weaker. I think it makes it more powerful. It shows us that these incredible ideals weren't perfect from the start. They were written by brilliant but deeply flawed and compromised men, reaching for a promise that even they couldn't fully keep. That is the complex human truth at the heart of the document.
And the struggle to live up to those words, well, that's the real American story. If you think learning the honest history, even the hard parts, is what matters, you know what to do. Thanks for watching.